Kakadosh Boker or Masechet Zevachim, Daf Yomi, Daf Mem Aleph, Amud Aleph, 41a1. We were just speaking about the entire concept over here of Par Helem Davar Shel Tzibur and the Sa'id Shel Yom Kippurim.
Doing 40?
So 41, but we're starting on 40b, right? Where it says that there's a concept of Par Helem Davar Shel Tzibur. Par Helem Davar Shel Tzibur is that when you have a bull that they didn't know a halacha, you remember when they went and they did something which is an averah, they didn't realize it, or a Sa'id Shel Yom Kippurim. And we went and we said like this. He says, korban. In a case where we have different species, the high par, the high sa'ir, because at the end of the day, the helem davar shel tzibur is a par. The sa'ir Yom Kippurim is a seed. The par is a bull, and the seed is a he-goat, right? But it's still going to be hushvu ma'asim lema'asim, but the korban is the same for both. What does it have to do? So now, if it is going to be written, that both korbanot are going to be makom shushva korban lekorban, where it is going to be the same, meaning, for example, it's a par Yom Kippurim and par Kol HaMashiach, right? The high paru, high par, both of them are par. Enodin, so shouldn't it be shushva maasim that it should be the same actions, which means that it should be basically the same halachot to do with it, that the same halachot, meaning like this: if you've got two different korbanot, one's a bull and one's going to be a he-goat. The Sa'id is seed of Yom Kippurim, right? The he-goat of Yom Kippurim. And the bull is the bull of Helem Davar Shel Tzibur, which means when you have a tzibur, they came and they forgot halacha, and they paskin like it, and then everyone comes and they do it, and then they realize a mistake, right? And then if you remember when we spoke a lot about this, whether it's in Horayot and other Masechtot, it had to do with, it had to be something of shogeg and karet and all these things, right? It wasn't just stam anything, or it had to be who's the one that's making the mistake, the entire, the Sanhedrin HaGadolah, and then everyone followed suit, and then hey, what happens if you didn't know about it, or you didn't know about it? Okay, fine. But now the question is like this: if right now we see that there's two different korbanot, a par and a sa'id, and it's still going to have the same halachot, so kal vachomer then, if it's going to be a bull and a bull, a par and a par, that it should have the same halachot, right? So he comes and he says, Shuru ma'asim ma'asim. So he says, Atale par Yom Kippurim, right? So therefore it's going to come, right, through a kal vachomer, the par Yom Kippurim, to say, Et badam utvila mi par Kol HaMashiach. Va'atele sa'ir Yom Kippurim u'sirei avdech mi kal vachomer. So therefore, he comes and he says like this. He wants to say that we're going to come and we're going to try to learn different things. So we wanted to say that when you're going to dip in the Par Yom Kippurim, and you remember we went and we wanted to make different halachot from the dippings, meaning how are you supposed to dip? So remember you had to dip with your finger. You have to dip inside of a kli sharet, inside of a holy utensil, and then you're not allowed to come and wipe off your finger on the edge of the receptacle, right? Certain halachot that it had to be v'tavala, it had to be tvila, has to be that you're dipping your finger inside and then you're coming and you're doing it. So he comes and he says over here, so according to this, we wanted to learn and we wanted to compare different halachot to each other. Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. Right? So he comes in now and he says like this, he says,
Can you combine a hekesh and a kal vachomer?
That's the question. Okay, so what happens is as follows, right? He comes and he says like this: he comes and he says like this. He says, I don't understand. Can you come and you already learned halacha with a hekesh? Can you now come afterwards and learn a kavachomer from that halacha? Right? At the end of the day, it doesn't make sense. The halachot of et badam, right, was only going to be a hekesh for parelem davar shel tzibur. So therefore, if you're already going to learn it from a hekesh, I could then come and make a kal vachomer for paralel davar shel tzibur later on to make it to other halachot as well. How do you do that? A hekesh is juxtaposition. Exactly. You remember about the photocopy and the original copy, which means that this. You have
made an hekesh, and with what I get, I want to do
a kal vachomer. How do you do that? You can't do that. That's what we're asking. We're asking you come, you have a hekesh. You have two things which are written beside each other, right? And you come and you wanted to learn the halachot from there. And all of a sudden now I want to do kal vachomer from there. How does that work? Rav Papa says, that yes, you could do that. Meaning, according to him, you're allowed to do that. That means once you already learned the hekesh, now I could come and I could again learn a kal vachomer. So because of that, that's what he's trying to say over here, right? That even though we came and we learned it from a hekesh, right? We are allowed to learn it again. That's what he's trying to say. We are allowed to learn it again in order to make a kal vachomer of Sirei of the Kochavim, a kal vachomer from the halachot of Par Yom Kippur, Seir Yom Kippurim, which Seir Yom Kippurim you learned it from Parelem Davar Shel Tzibur. So one more time. Par elem davar shel tzibur, we made a hekesh from that to Seir Yom Kippurim. And then we wanted to learn a Seir of Avodah Zarah from the Seir of Yom Kippurim. Because it's both Seir. They're both he-goats. So therefore, we went and we wanted to make a kal v'chomer. If one is a par and one is a seir, one is a bull and one is a he-goat, and they still have the same halachot because of a hekesh, kal v'chomer, a seir and a seir, a he-goat and a he-goat, that it should also be the same halachot. So he says, yeah, but you only learned the bull and the he-goat from a hekesh. So the answer to the Gemara, you're right. According to the Shita, you're allowed to learn kal v'chomer from a hekesh. So says the Gemara. So what does it mean then? What would we learn from the word then lapar? So he says zepar elem davar shel tzibur. We already know that when it says lapar, it's par elem davar shel tzibur. So he says hatzibur gufektiv. He says the milah lapar is in itself talking about a par elem davar shel tzibur. So why do we have to come and say again, right? Of par elem. Why do we need the word par? So Amar of Papa comes and he says mishum demai gumure. We had to learn par elem davar shel tzibur biyoteret ushte klayot lesirei de kochavim. So says the Gemara. So one more time, we had par elem davar shel tzibur. We had to learn it to do with the requirement of bringing the yoteret hakaved and shte klayot. Yoteret hakaved is the extra liver, right? It's not
the diaphragm, the two kidneys.
Yes, the kidneys and the diaphragm, exactly. Okay. So he says like this. He says to do with the hekesh of sirei of de kochavim. Okay. So that means basically the Torah does not say that you have to actually bring, right, the sirei of de kochavim, but they learn it from a hekesh from par elem davar shel tzibur. So we learn a hekesh that we have to bring that also to the mizbeach. Par elem davar shel tzibur begufeh loktiv. It's not written. Ela be'hekeshati. It also comes from a hekesh. So therefore, you need it itzich lepar. The me'ave keman dechti begufeh. So it's like kilu. It's written there in itself. Velo la'avi davar le'mekesh chutz le'mekesh. Which means like this. Beforehand, we had a hekesh, and then we wanted to learn a kal v'chomer. We said, can you do that? We said, according to Torah Mishmel, yes, you're allowed to do that. Now we have another question. Can you do a hekesh and after another hekesh on a hekesh? So therefore, what happened was like this. You have the Sa'id of Avodah Zorah. There, right, we wanted to learn that you should bring the Yoteret HaKaved and Shtei HaKaliyot, what did you say? The diaphragm and the kidneys. The diaphragm and the kidneys from, meaning you have to burn them. You have to bring them to the Mizbeach. And that you learn it from Par Elem Davar Shel Tzibur. But that in itself, Par Elem Davar Shel Tzibur is also learned from a Hekesh. So therefore, it says that in order that there we know that you don't do a Hekesh to a Hekesh. So in order that it's not considered a Hekesh to another Hekesh, we had to make it in such a fashion, right? We had to make it in such a way that it's ki'ilu, it's written mefurash there. So if it's written mefurash, I'm not doing a kesh to another kesh, which in essence is what you're doing. But we don't want to. You're not allowed to. So ki'ilu, we're making it that it's written explicitly, and therefore it's not that you're doing that. Okay. So he says like this: Tanya kaveteder of Papa. We learned in the bright and accordance to Rav Papa, right? Why? Because it says like this: ve'asa kasher asa. You remember when it says ve'asa, you're going to do it, and just like you did it. So matzah. So what does it mean now when it says lapar? Since it says vehem eviu korbanam mishel Hashem, they have to bring the korban to Hashem. Chatatam is the sirei avodah kochavim. So their sin offering is the seed, the he-goat of avodah zarah. Shigigatam, when it says their accident, it's parelem davar shel tzibur, when they made a mistake, which means that they got a psak from somebody. It was a mistake. That's parelem davar shel tzibur, when the tzibur made a mistake and they went through it. Chatatam, right? Al shigigatam. Amra Torah chatatam. So therefore, the chatat is like the shegega, meaning whatever the halachot apply to Sirei Avodah Zarah is what applies to the Parelem Davar Shel Tzibur. Shigegatam Hechal HaMatava. Where did you learn shigegatam from? Be'ekesha. You learned it from a kesh. So ask the Gemara. You can't do that. You can't learn from one kesh to another kesh. Tamulomar comes teach you lapar, which is Parelem Davar Shel Tzibur, and lepar is Par Kohen Mashiach, which means that since right now the extra word lapar was ki'ilu writing it mefurash, right, explicitly that it's there
to the
bull, and therefore we don't need to learn from one Hekesh to another Hekesh. It's ki'ilu that the original one is already there. So it's not that I'm learning from one Hekesh to another Hekesh. Really, Be'emet, the second Hekesh was already in the first Hekesh, because it said lapar, which was extra. So since to the bull was extra in the first one already, so therefore ki'ilu was already there. So it's not that I'm learning from one Hekesh to another Hekesh. That second halacha is already written in the first Hekesh. It's already there. It's already there. Okay? So Amar Mor. So, and by the way, everything we learned it from chatatam to shigatam, that we were comparing to the chatat to the shogeg. Chatat is the sin, right? Which is also b'shogeg, by the way. It's also by accident. That's why it's called the chatat, the sin offering, to the shogeg. Okay? So, Amar Mor says, chatatam is of the kochavim. So, typically mikra kama. He says, why don't you learn from the first pasuk then? Amar Mor, hachatat elu sireh the kochavim. Right? You just learn from the beginning. Why do we need an extra hekesh to learn the din of aktarata yoteret shnei aklayot? You already have it from the beginning. Summer of Papa says itzich, you needed it. Why? Salkadaita chamina. I would have thought to say hanemile. When is it going to be that they're going to learn a hekesh and everything, that it's going to be the same thing of sireh dochavim to parelem devash tzibur, only to do with the hazaot, with the sprinklings of the blood. Tichtiva megufeh, because it's written there. Meaning there it's written mefurash that they have to come and they're going to sprinkle the bloods. It doesn't speak about bringing the kidney and the diaphragm and all those things to the mizbeach. It's not written. So therefore, I would have had a havamina. It only has to do with what? With that, with the bloods, and not with anything else, right? Aval memale from bet 41b. But right, in a case where what?
Diaphragm and kidneys.
Exactly. In the case of the diaphragm and the kidneys, he comes and he says, "Hey, that it's not written." I would have said that no, that there's no hekesh. Kamash Malan comes to teach you. That's why we need an extra hekesh to teach you that it also applies to the diaphragm and the
Are you
kidneys.
saying you have a double hekesh?
No, it's not that you can have a double hekesh. We asked, why did you need a double hekesh if you already had it in the first one? So he said, no, if we only had the first one, I would have only applied it to the bloods and not to anything else,
But
to
you
the
said
sprinkling.
You can't have a double hekesh.
It's not. It's that the second hekesh, if you remember, we said that since it was an extra word, it's kilu was written in the first one. So he said, but if it's already there in the first one, why do I need a second one at all? So he comes and he says, no, the reason why is because if I only had the first one, I would have said that it only applies to the sprinkling of the blood and not to the diaphragm and the kidneys. Now that I have the second one, it also applies to that.
Second one.
Second hekesh. You can have a second hekesh, yeah, but it says the extra word lepad, and therefore, since it says the extra word lepad, it's kilu, it's written in the first one, so therefore it's fine.
It's like we call that bootstrapping.
So Amaleh Rav Huna berei de Rav Natan le Rav Papa. Says Rav Huna, the son of Rav Natan, to Rav Papa. Vehatana lerabot par yom kippurim lechol she'amur ba'inyan kama. He says, I thought that the word lapar, I needed it to do with par yom kippurim to teach you that everything that happens to the par elam davar shel tzibur is going to happen to the par yom kippurim. So therefore, from here, I already know that the matanot adam is me'akev the kapara. So it's not like you then, because you told me that the pasuk is coming to teach you that it's only et badam to do with the tefillah on the Par Yom Kippurim, but not to do that it impedes. You remember we spoke about the different, when you come and you start sprinkling the bloods, does it impede or not? And then we came and we said it depends how many depends on the inner mizbeach, outer mizbeach, how many times you have to sprinkle anyway, what impedes. So here he's coming to say, I thought that the word lepar was not coming to add in, kilu, to plug in. How did you call it? Bootstrapping. It's not that. He says very simple. It's applying it 100% to do with the matanot. What does it mean matanot? Remember the presents, because whenever you're sprinkling the blood on the mizbeach, it's kilu, you're giving a present to Hashem. That's why it's called matanot, right? So he says the Gemara, you're right. Tanaihi, it's a machloket Tanaim. Tana dveirav merabi hachi, v'tan mishmel lo merabi hachi. He says each Tana they learned it differently. So one of them they learned it from et badam in the tefillah, and they didn't learn there that it's going to impede the matanot, the sprinklings of the blood. And Tana de
He doesn't use to the bowl.
Yes, he doesn't use it. And the Tana of Ishmael, he comes and he does, right? Because he's learning from the word lapar, everything. That it even includes the blood as well. Which means that the blood impedes, that if you don't come and sprinkle the blood, it's also going to impede. That is the Tana of Ishmael. So basically, there's two different academies, like two different, schools of thought, and how they're learning up, right? That which it says, the word of the par. Okay, so therefore that's why there's two different academies. So therefore it's machlot tanaim. You're right, right? You can't ask from one to another. Each one is a different school of thought. Okay. Next, Tana Ishmael. So Tana Ishmael, the academy of Ishmael come and they say, they ask a very simple question: why is it that we have to come and we have to learn Hekech? Why is it that by the Par Kohen Mashiach, right? It says mefurash about the diaphragm. It says explicitly about the diaphragm and the kidneys. And by the Parelem Devar Tzibur, it doesn't say it. Why? You're right. Afterwards, we're coming and we're learning it, and it's considered a Hekesh, not considered a Hekesh from another Hekesh, everything that you want. But why is it like that? So says the Gemara, Mashal Melech Basav Adam, Sheza'am al Oavo, Umi'et Besirchono, Mipnei Chibato. So he comes and he says very, very simple. He says it's a mashal to a king that all of a sudden his best friend, his beloved man, he came and he sinned. Now, he doesn't actually come and explicitly write out all the different things, right? Why? Because he doesn't want such a bad stench. He doesn't want a bad smell on it. He doesn't want a bad. So what does he do? He minimizes what's written there, so therefore it doesn't sound so bad. So the same thing. Meaning HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes and he says, Pare len davar shel tzibur. So therefore, we are so beloved to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he doesn't want to come and start saying about the diaphragm and the kidneys and the this and the this. He tries to minimize everything that's written there because he doesn't want to speak a lot about it. It's kilu, keep it under the rug. Why? I love him so much. I love the tzibur so much. I love Bnei Yisrael so much. I don't want them to come, right, and to do this. You understand? So actually, I'm going to speak about it on Shabbat, a beautiful yesod to do with praising. And you know, the Gemara says that we are considered banim shel makom, the children of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But we learn from Parashat Noach that you're only supposed to say a little bit of the praise in front of a person. You never say all the praise. So he says, so according to that, if it says explicitly about us that we are banim shel Hashem, it means really be'emet we're even more than banim to Hashem. Because that's only part of the praise. So it means really be'emet we're even more than that. It's like, you know, like we're so precious in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a different world. You understand? It's something. So therefore, that's what we're trying to say over here. So he says, "V'tana de Ishmael." Tana Ishmael taught. Why does it say parochet hakodesh by Parkol Mashiach? So he says, "V'lo ne'emar b'paralel davar shatzibur, mashal melech v'tzav davar shesachalav medina." The entire Medina went and he went against the king. Im miyata sircha, right? Pamalya shalom itkaimet. If he's going to minimize it, so therefore he's still going to be fine. Im rubas sircha, but if the majority of the Medina go against him, em pamalya shalom itkaimet. So then there's nothing. Meaning basically then the king himself is basically, you know, taking it away. So therefore the same thing. If it was only the Kohen Gadol, so you still have the Bet HaMikdash, you still have everything fine. But if you have the majority of the Tzibur, it's Kilu, there's no Kiddusha anymore. So therefore the same thing. That's why the par Kohen Mashiach is the Kohen Gadol. The par Helem Davar Shel Tzibur is the majority of the Tzibur. So because of that, it was just giving us a mashal, right, a parable in order for us just to understand why did it say Kodesh or not. Kodesh meaning holy, the parochet. So he says, because if it was only one person, everything is still holy. The Bet HaMikdash is still holy, everything is still holy. But he says, but if the majority of the Tzibur sinned, nobody's holy anymore. So for it's not parochet, the Kodesh. Lefichach, right? Therefore, we're in the two dots now, okay? So that was just two different beautiful mashals, which I think is very, very beautiful. Lefichach, now we're going back. We say like this. Therefore, if we just learned that all the matanot of the chatot pnimiot are me'akvot, which means in the inside mizbeach, the mizbeach pnimi, the inner one, or the mizbeach ketoret, which is called the ketoret mizbeach, or mizbeach zahav, the golden zahav, right? The golden mizbeach. So if on those ones you have to do four corners, right? Because it had four corners, so if you have to sprinkle the blood on all four corners, if you didn't do it on all four corners, so if it's going to be a problem. So Tananahata, we learned over there, pigel bekometz velo belevona, if a person made a pigul, whether it's going to be in the kometz and not in the levona, but levona velo kometz b'midos omer, b'mid comes and he says pigul v'chayvim alav karet, you're going to be chayav karet. Chachamim comes saying bo karet ad shifekei bechol matid. There's not going to be karet until you're going to be matid. You're going to be do pigul in all the matid. So Amar Rabbi Shimon Lakish says Rabbi Shimon Lakish, Lo tema ta'amad Rabbi Meir de kasam mefaglim bechatzi matid. Don't say that the reasoning of Rabbi Meir is going to be because he holds in mefaglim bechatzi matid. Elahachama eskina, what are we dealing with? Kigon shenatan et kometz b'machshava, right? You put the kometz in a machshava, right? A levona b'shtika, and the levona b'shtika. So kasavar kol ha'oseh al dat rishona hu oseh. Anybody that's doing anything, you're doing it al dat rishona. What does that mean? When you come and you're doing something, you're always doing it stam. So you're always doing it according to what you did at the beginning. And therefore, even though the Kohen came and he had Mechshevet Pigul only after, right, like during the first Taktara, which is the first time that you're putting it, but it's still considered that you did it, right? The second one, Mechshevet Pigul, because it's Pigul B'chol Matir, because at the end of the day, you continue with the first mindset. So whatever you had in the first mindset continues going. So says the Gemara, Mimai, how do you know this halacha? How do you know this? How do you know that you always go according to the first mindset? Because we said if you gave all of them in the same properly, and one of them you didn't do properly, it's going to be pasul, but there's no karet, right? But if one of them was done not properly, right, and then all the rest was done properly, it's called pigul. So it's mashma over here that when it says shaloki tikna, it's because afterwards you did it. That means the first one that you did it all properly. So we go after that, meaning that If a person comes and he did everything properly, and just at the end he messed up, okay, fine. So it's only going to be psul. It's going to be disqualified, but it's not a pigul. Why? Because you did everything properly. It was just the last thing you just slipped up. But here, if from the beginning you already had a bad mindset, that's it. So mani, who is this? If you're going to tell me it's Rabbanan, right? We already said it according to Rabbanan, em falim b'chatziyah matir. Meaning, according to the Rabbanan, the second that you started something, or it doesn't matter what happens, you never make pigul on half of it. You have to, in order for you to make pigul, you need an everything which is going to be permitting you for the korban. So if you have 4 sprinklings and all of them impede, it doesn't exist pigul only on 1 or 2 or 3. You need all 4. That's according to the rabbis. You cannot do pigul on half of a matir, on half of something which is going to permit you. But according to Rabbi Meir, you could say that. V'itay mad Rabbi Meir, if you're going to tell me according to Rabbi Meir, is because you are allowed to do pigul on chatziyah matir. Afilu k'titani nami, it's not because he's saying that you're always going to do it according to the beginning. So Amar Shmuel bar Yitzchak le'olam Rabbanani. No, really, be'emet it is Rabbanan. So what does it mean now ketikanan? So he says ketikanan means like pigul. Yeah, what does that mean for pigul? Which is machshevet chutz zmano, outside of the zmano. Ve'hamed that which we learned the fichach, and therefore im natan kulan ketiknan v'achat shelo ketiknan pasul ve'mo karet. There's no karet. Miklal de tikna le'achshida hu data, that it's coming to permit it. So Amar Rava shelo tikna chutz imkomo. Ravashi Amar shelo lishmo. Meaning like this. What does it mean now that it wasn't done properly? Shelo tikna means lo tikna means not like properly done. What does it mean not properly done? So according to one opinion, right, shelo tikna means outside of the makom. Now remember, we always said that if it's outside of the makom, does it become pigul?
No.
No, it disqualifies. And is there karet?
No.
No.
Only
It's
for time.
only for time, only for pigul, right? Is there karet? And it's all. The second shita is Ravashi, and Ravashi says it's talking about shelo lishma. You remember lo lishma means it wasn't for the sake of the korban.
For its own sake, but then for what purpose then?
No, you did it for another korban. You remember we said lo lishma means that you did it for another korban, or you didn't do it for the owners. You remember we spoke about that. What happens now if you didn't do it for the owners? So that's usually for a chatat, right? For the chatat, right?
For sure,
So
it won't work with a chatat.
yeah, but that's what we said, that by the chatat it is going to impede. So he says, "Miklal dechiloavile chutz mekomam v'shelo lishmon mechayev." You're going to be mechayev. I did the Tani Reisha, since we learned in the Reisha pigul v'chayevim ala karet. Tani Nami Seifa, we also learned in the Seifa pasul ve'embo karet. There's not going to be karet. And then we're going to ask the question, meitvei, but when we one of these words, bedamim and terim b'chsuet niton.
Is liable for pigul now?
Which one?